Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. In this video I'm going to show you the most basic steps you need to take in order to secure access to a fresh install of an Ubuntu server. We will be going through the following steps. We will create an SSH access key on our client. We will enhance the security of the access key by giving it a passphrase. We will make the server accept the access key. We will make the server reject all password-based logins so the server becomes immune to brute force attacks. And then we will finally set up our firewall so it only allows inbound traffic on our SSH port, which is port 22. So let's get going. So here we are on a standard Ubuntu desktop machine. I have opened up a terminal window, and the first thing we want to do is to set up our SSH access key. We do that by typing in ssh-keygen and we press enter. The first thing we get is a prompt asking us where to store the key. We see that the default is to store it under our home directory in a folder named .ssh. We press enter to accept the default location. The next thing we have to do is to set our passphrase. You can think of the passphrase as a password to use the key. We will see this in action a little bit later, but for now just enter a good long password, type it again and press enter. We can now enter our directory. So we go into cd //.ssh. In there we will see two files. We have an id_rsa and an id_rsa.pub. If we look into the second file, we can see our public key. This string is what the key is made out of. The next thing we want to do is to copy our public key file over to the server that we want to secure. A quick way to do this is to use the command ssh-copy-id. We need to point it to the public key location, which is still in the default. And then we have to add our server. You put in username at your server address. In my case, the server is just named server. We press enter and we get prompted for the password to our server. We put it in, press enter, and the file gets copied over. Once you've done this, we can try again to log on to our server. Let's SSH. And now we can see the first thing that's going to happen is that we get prompted for the password to unlock the private key. This is a long good passphrase that we put in earlier. This is incredibly handy because even if someone managed to steal our key, they don't have the passphrase to the key, so they've never been able to use it to break into our server. So we put in our passphrase to unlock the key. And now we can see that we can log on to our server without having to type in a password on the server itself. But we're not done yet. The server will still accept password-based authentication. So we need to go into our SSH server and make a few changes to make sure that it rejects all password-based authentication and only uses keys. We do that by going into our sshd config. Remember to sudo. And there are a couple of changes that we have to make here. First thing is to find the pub key authentication. We uncomment it and keep it as yes. The next one is to find password authentication. We need to uncomment that one as well. But we want to put that as no, because we don't want any passwords on the server anymore. Once you've done that, you can save and close the file. And we have to restart the sshd. And now we can try to exit the server again. Let's try to log in with a different user that doesn't have a key. On this server I have a user called user1. So let's see what happens when we try to get in. We get permission denied, public key. That means the server is not accepting passwords anymore, but we can still go on with our old user. So now that we have sorted out our SSH key and our passphrase, we probably want to have a good look at our firewall setup. So let's dig in. By default, Ubuntu comes with UFW installed. That stands for Uncomplicated Firewall. We can see the default is that the status is inactive. That means that the firewall is not doing anything. It's allowing everything through. But the firewall service is still running. So if we have a look at the service itself, we can see that it is indeed active. So let's go and configure our firewall. The first rule that we want to have in our firewall is a deny everything rule. We do it like this, deny incoming. The second rule we want to put in is to allow SSH, because we are logged into this machine on SSH at the moment. It's really important that we put that allow command in before we enable the firewall, because else we're going to be locked out. And we can actually see that the firewall is prompting us and reminding us that this could disrupt your connections. Once we've done this, we can look at the status, and we can see that now we're allowing port 22 on TCP. This means that the firewall will not accept any connections on any other port than TCP 22. So now we have a working server that does not accept any password authentication on SSH and has a good firewall setup that only allows SSH. And this is a very good standard baseline beginning for a server that you want to put out on the internet. I hope you learned something from this, and thank you very much. See you next time.